This is the Uptick Newswire Stock Day Podcast, sponsored by InvestorsHangout.com. Subscribe to us on iTunes, Google Play, and YouTube to stay up to date on penny stock news and interviews, public information on OTC, pink sheets, and microcap stocks from around the world, with your host, Everett Jolly.
On today's show, we do have a returning guest. He was back on the show in October, I believe, and I asked him to come back on the show to give us a little bit of an update of what's going on in the rare metals industry. We're talking about Commerce Resources Corp. Well, they trade on the TSXV under the ticker symbol CCE, and with us today is Chris Grove. Chris, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Everett. Good to be back on the show. It's my pleasure.
You know, people that missed the interview back in October, maybe give them a little bit of about statement of what you guys do and what you're about.
Sure, absolutely. So Commerce Resources was created as an IPO in August of 2001, and at that time we were focused on deposits of tantalum and niobium here in British Columbia. When the opportunity arose in the market for a non-Chinese source of rare earth elements in 2005, we also went out and started looking for a world-class rare earth element project. The interesting thing geologically is that all of the world's niobium and over 80% of the world's rare earth elements come from the same type of rock, which is a volcanic type of rock which comes out from the center of the earth. So typically when you find these deposits, and there are only about 500 known on planet Earth, but typically when you find them, they can be enormous deposits, and so they are called carbonatites. At any rate, in this same kind of time frame, in 2006, 2007, the niobium price quadrupled on the world market, and it has never fallen back down since that time. So in early 2007, we staked these claims in northern Quebec. The set of claims are called the Eldor. And so at the same time, we were looking for a world-class niobium primary and a rare earth element primary at the same time. And due to the fact I think we were the only junior looking in two separate jurisdictions for niobium, we saw our share price, go from like 40 cents up to $1.80, which was quite exciting, I will say that. At any rate, the bottom line is that it was we found our rare earth element project in the last day of the summer program in 2009, and a year later, in August of 2010, we released the discovery hole of what is now called the Ashram Rare Earth Element Project. And since that time, we have released economics on both of our projects, and they both have huge resources and positive economics. So it's a pleasure to speak to you today. The one thing I would like to say before we go any further, which is a major difference in October, is that rare earth element prices are definitively moving upwards. We're seeing upward price pressure since about January of 2017, and the trajectory seems very clear. Prices are moving higher. I can certainly speak to the reasons for that, but the bottom line is that when prices start moving up, that's when you get some wind in your sails, and everyone essentially, scrambling may be the wrong word, but everyone is getting active in trying to get their ducks in a row to figure out what they are going to do, what they need to do to make sure they have supply, for the foreseeable future.
Well, let me ask you a couple questions. Is these rare elements, are they measured by ounces or by pounds? And what's the price point?
They're typically measured in kilos, and so the price per kilo, and then you have to translate them typically from renminbi into U.S. dollars. So on balance, the prices, say for example, dysprosium. Dysprosium, was like $90 a kilo in 2009. By early 2011, it was at $3,000 a kilo.
Oh my God!
Dysprosium is now about somewhere in the 250 to 280 per kilo range. So if you cut off the peak of that spike, you've gone from, say, $90 to $280, let's say. So, that essentially is a tripling of the price of a commodity in 8 years, which I don't know any other commodities that have tripled in price. Dysprosium, though, is not seeing the greatest upward price pressure right now. What is seeing the greatest price pressure and is used in greater amounts, in pure volume, would be neodymium, praseodymium, and terbium. And those prices have seen a greater percentage increase so far in 2017. Part of that story is that dysprosium did end up in 2011 being one of the most expensive rare earth elements. Dysprosium is also one of the rare earth elements that is absolutely essential to then manufacturing a permanent magnet. And most of the market, or I should say the greatest sector of usage for rare earth elements, is the magnet market. In terms of when dysprosium's price got so incredibly high in 2011, the next thing that happened is completely logical, is that everyone and their dog tried to find substitutes for rare earth elements in general, but dysprosium in particular. Now, in the differences in the recipe for rare earth element permanent magnets in the last 6 years, the only thing that was successful is a reduction of the amount of dysprosium. However, the percentage reduction of dysprosium then has to get answered by a percentage increase in the other three rare earth elements I mentioned, so neodymium, praseodymium, and terbium. So the price increases for those three being greater than dysprosium does make sense. You still really, no one can make a decent permanent magnet without a small percentage of dysprosium. It is still essential, and it looks like that whole drive in R&D for improvements or substitutions in rare earth elements for magnets, that ship has sailed. And so I think the whole industry right now is comfortable with the current recipe for rare earth element magnets. But again, you are seeing a greater price increase for neodymium, praseo, and terbium.
Now that you've given us a little bit of background on what you guys are about, tell me what's the most exciting thing happening right now to your company?
Well, I think the most exciting thing right now is the news that we announced on Monday of this week, which is the MOU between Ucore Rare Metals, and we will be producing a sample for Ucore that they will be processing at their facility in Utah, using their molecular recognition technology. We're very excited about this association, and we're certainly looking forward to delivering that sample to Ucore in Utah. And we are certainly optimistic that the MRT works for our concentrate. To make it very clear, the Ashram project uses standard processing technology to produce a rare earth element concentrate, which is to say we can produce a rare earth element concentrate that compares with any of the rare earth element commercial mines on planet Earth in terms of grade and in terms of recovery. And it is our goal to do that at a similar operating cost because we're using the same standard processing. At that point, we have many requests for a sample, but we're interested in sending a sample of that concentrate to Ucore to see if it runs through their system, their MRT system at their facility in Utah. That's very exciting to us. And at the end of the day, potentially the size of the Ashram deposit is such that we could be in production for, generations, let's say, at a minimum. And with the Ucore facility in Utah processing our concentrate through to separated oxides, that could be, essentially an integrated rare earth element supply chain that could be the backbone of anyone who needs rare earth elements to manufacture their products.
Absolutely.
Such as the entire list of defense contractors for the United States. And I'm touching on Lockheed, Boeing, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, General Atomics, United Technologies, everybody. All of these weapon systems that have been negotiated in sales by President Trump, all of these weapon systems, we're not just talking about M16s, we're talking about very sophisticated weapons and weapon systems that need rare earth elements to be produced.
I want to ask you a two-point question, if I could. One, when do you think some of these results are going to fall onto the balance sheet? And two, what has happened in terms of supply and demand and price for the REEs?
Let me answer the second part first. In terms of supplies for the rare earth elements, very clearly one of the significant events that happened was 2 years ago in June when Molycorp actually shuttered their operation in California. Molycorp, of course, shut down operations in 2002, and essentially, to cut to the chase, they allowed the Chinese into their facility in the 1990s, and the Chinese went back home and figured out how to undercut Molycorp. Following that, with what the Chinese did, putting an export duty on rare earth elements in 2005, creating a two-tiered pricing system, the Chinese cutting off supply to Japan in the fall of 2010, all of these things led to these spiking rare earth element prices. And lo and behold, with exactly the same processing, Molycorp was, for a couple of years, back in operation and was economic. Now, having said that, due to the falling prices between the years of 2012 through the end of 2016, Molycorp shut down operations in June of 2015. The takeaway from this point is that Molycorp was producing about 20,000 tons of a mix of cerium and lanthanum, and them closing down was a simple act of capitulation, and that was a reduction in supply. However, to bring you right up to date right now, the current reasons being used by the Chinese for the rising prices are shutdowns in China due to environmental inspections. Certainly the government of China has been credited many times with doing this incredible job of taking 500 or so million people out of abject poverty and getting them into the middle class. But that has done two other things, arguably. One is creating a middle class that is more concerned about environmental pollution, etc. Second, it's created a group of people that also want a fair wage. And so those two things combined potentially are pushing up rare earth element prices right now. Certainly as well, I would just mention that the Chinese are also dominant in the supply of what is our byproduct, which is fluorspar, and they're using the same set of reasons to justify higher prices for fluorspar, which again, our environmental inspections are shutting down supply, and we can clearly see the demands for higher labor costs in China as well. I've gone on so long, I forgot the first part of your question, though. Sorry.
No, I wanted to know, how you're going to monetize this and how that's going to fall on your balance sheet and when.
Oh, that. Okay. Well, great. Well, one of the questions that is similar to a question I get asked all the time, and one of the things is that we're, just a little Canadian company that has to follow the legislation that was put into place by the Canadian government following the, fiasco of the mining company whose name shall not be mentioned. It's like saying Macbeth in a theater, which of course is Bre-X, the subject of that good Matthew McConaughey movie Gold. The bottom line is that the 43-101 legislation is the most demanding piece of mining legislation on planet Earth, which essentially requires us to do 3 economic reports. We have completed the first one, the preliminary economic assessment for both of our deposits. I would say, are about 95% through the data production for the pre-feasibility study, but arguably we would still need to finish the pre-feas and then finish a bankable feasibility study for the Ashram project before we apply for a mining license. With full capital available, we arguably could finish the bankable, I would say, in about 2.5 years, and then hopefully we would be in production within, say, another 2 years following that.
The reason why I asked you that, recently you guys did a private placement, I believe in February, around $1.7 million. What are you going to use that money for?
Yes, absolutely. So the money, the use of proceeds, as was stated, was to advance and potentially complete the pilot plant, which is one of the remaining data sets that we would need to complete to finish then the pre-feasibility study. The pilot plant has been operational and is set up at Hazen Research in Golden, Colorado, and we are about, I would say, 85 to 90% of the way through that pilot plant. We have piloted everything, which is time and volume, essentially, that the pilot plant has been operational, excepting for the final stage, which is magnetic separation. So our goal with the funds we raised in February and also the funds we raised just 2 weeks ago is to restart the pilot plant and complete the pilot plant, and then also produce the samples that have been requested by us, by UCOR, and then about 10 other companies, including many majors on the world stage for rare earth elements. The other thing I would like to mention about that private placement in February was the direct equity investment by the Quebec government through their fund for juniors, which is called Resource Quebec. This is the first $1 million of the 1.7, the first $1 million, which was a direct investment from Quebec into our project, and we're very, very thankful for that. Ultimately, Quebec is seen as one of the top mining jurisdictions on the planet, and there are many reasons for that, not only that they directly invest into the companies, but then they also do other things like, build infrastructure. And so that's another aspect that we're looking forward to optimistically that the government will be active on.
Company that we're highlighting today is Commerce Resources Corp. Well, they trade on the TSX Venture in Canada under the ticker symbol CCE. In closing here, Chris, what are you looking forward mostly going forward here? What are you optimistic about? Certain projects?
Understood, Everett. I'm most excited about what may be coming down the pike based on the rising prices of the rare earth elements. The rising prices has created an amount of urgency from the companies that have requested samples from us, and we certainly look forward to hopefully establishing and securing a project-level investment from a company which would be a non-dilutive style of investment. I know that many shareholders are concerned with venture-listed companies and continually doing private placements to finance their operations, and I would suggest that our optimism is such that we're at a pivot point right now where the delivery of samples to some of the majors, Solvay, Tribacher, Mitsubishi, BASF, etc., or UCOR, that this could lead to what we call a project-level investment where one of these companies will then want to own a percentage of our future offtake for capital or a percentage of the asset itself. And this kind of arrangement, this kind of deal, this kind of M&A has arguably not been possible in the atmosphere of falling prices for the last 5-6 years. But now that prices are definitively moving upwards, I do think we have a possibility in achieving success on this, and that is my short-term hope.
We're speaking with Chris Grove. He is the president of Commerce Resources. Well, they trade also on the OTCQX under the ticker symbol CMRZF. Like I said earlier, they trade on the Toronto Stock Exchange Venture under the ticker symbol CCE. Chris, I want to thank you for taking time out, coming on the show. All I ask is that you not wait 7 or 8 months to come back on the show and give us an update, maybe in 50 or 60 days. And like I said, it's a pleasure to have you on here.
That sounds great. It would be my pleasure. I will look to be on the show again in that time frame. Thank you, Everett.
This program is entirely sponsored and produced by Uptick Newswire, LLC, which is responsible for the content. The opinions and information provided on this program are those of the guests and those of the respective companies they represent, and do not necessarily reflect those of the staff or management of Uptick Newswire. Uptick Newswire encourages all listeners of this program to do their due diligence and research when determining investment strategies that'll work for them, or to seek the assistance of an investment professional. The guests of this program may have paid for its distribution and are not directly affiliated with Uptick Newswire or this station.